If you're struggling right now because your narcissistic ex has moved on and is now with someone else, you're in the right place because today I'm going to share a 4-part framework a woman we are working with used to cope with how quickly her ex moved on, so you can use it too. You'll learn what to do, how to do it, and Jennifer Parella, a therapist with 21 years of experience, will explain why this framework works. If we are just meeting, my name is Juliana. I'm a founder of Unfilteredd, and we help you overcome the effects of narcissistic abuse so you can heal and move forward with your life. The first part of this framework is practicing self-care. When you're going through something like this, self-care is non-negotiable. So we always recommend giving your days a structure to help ensure your basic needs are being met. This includes things like going to sleep and waking up around the same time so you're getting enough sleep, having a morning routine so you're always showering, brushing your teeth, and, if prescribed, taking your medication, scheduled meals and carrying a water bottle so you're eating and drinking enough, and carving out time each day for exercise or, at the very least, getting outside for sunlight and fresh air. If you'd like to create your own structure, try asking Gemini or ChatGPT the following question. Can you give me a list of self-care habits every adult should consider doing to ensure their basic needs are being met and how often to do them? Then, pick and choose from the list it gives you to build a structure that works for you. You don't need to start with everything. Just choose 1 or 2 habits you're currently missing and focus on those first. According to Jennifer, this first part is important because when you take care of your basic needs, it gives you the stability you need to regulate your emotions. Without that stability, the negative emotions triggered by seeing your ex move on so quickly will likely feel more intense and difficult to manage. Self-care helps lower that intensity and makes coping easier. The second part of this framework is limiting exposure. This means cutting down how much you see, hear about, or interact with your narcissistic ex and the people who support them as much as possible. This could look like removing physical reminders of them from your space, such as gifts or photos, turning off the memories features on your devices, unsubscribing from shared services like Netflix where you'd see their activity, unfollowing them and people who might post about them on social media, modifying your routine to avoid places where you might run into them, like the gym, asking your friends and family not to give you updates, or if possible, blocking them everywhere and going no contact. Jennifer says this second part is important because the fewer reminders you have of your ex and their new relationship, the fewer triggers you'll have to cope with, and this makes the ups and downs that come with healing much easier to manage. Let's move on to the third part of this framework, researching. Now, I wish you'd believe me straight away when I tell you that your ex's ability to move on so quickly has nothing to do with you and everything to do with them. But it just doesn't work like that, not when we are in this much pain. So one of the best things you can do to start coming to terms with this reality is to do some research about why narcissists behave the way they do. And I'd like to help you get started by sharing the most eye-opening explanation I know of. Narcissists need narcissistic supply to survive. Their upbringing left them with a sense of being unlovable, unwanted, inadequate, worthless, and weak, as well as without the emotional skills needed to manage those feelings. To cope, they developed an unrealistically positive self-view that's fueled by the validation, admiration, reassurance, power, and control, narcissistic supply, they extract from others. This self-view acts as a psychological shield, suppressing all of the negative feelings they're incapable of managing, but it requires a massive amount of supply to stay intact. So since relationships are often the biggest source of supply they have access to, when one ends, replacing it as quickly as possible is a fundamental requirement for their survival. Because if they don't, they'll be flooded with all the unresolved trauma from their upbringing that they're incapable of managing, and it would destroy them psychologically. So in the same way, you wouldn't take it personally if someone dying of thirst drank your water without asking for permission. You shouldn't take it personally that your ex moved on so quickly, because narcissistic supply is a fundamental requirement for their existence. But don't just take my word for it. Please go do some research on your own, because according to Jennifer, knowledge is the foundation of coping. When you find the words to explain what you're going through, it stops being a mess in your head that creates all this self-blame, self-doubt, and confusion, and becomes something you can understand, heal from, and move through. The fourth part of this framework is getting support. Ideally, this means working with a mental health professional who specializes in narcissistic abuse. But if that's not an option, it's about finding someone you trust who understands this type of abuse and is willing to be there for you when you need them. That said, you have to be really careful here. Narcissistic people are so good at hiding their abusive nature behind a positive, almost wholesome public image. So when you do speak up to others about what happened, there's a chance you might hear things like, "That doesn't sound like them," or "They would never say something like that." And this can be just as traumatizing as the abuse itself. In our opinion, the most effective way to tell if someone is safe to open up to isn't by sharing your own story, but by paying attention to how they respond to someone else's. A simple example of this could be saying something like, "I read this woman's post on Reddit about how it took her 7 attempts to leave an abusive relationship. It sounded so confusing and painful." Then just listen. If they can't respond to someone else's experience with empathy, respect, and understanding, they're probably not going to respond that way to yours either. However, if they can, feel free to try sharing small bits and pieces of your story. But remember, trust is built one layer at a time, and your experiences should only be shared with people who've earned the right to hear them. Jennifer says this fourth step is important because talking to someone who truly understands what you've been through helps you feel less alone and validates your experiences. That validation gives your mind and body permission to start healing, and this opens the door to things like self-compassion, setting boundaries, and many other aspects of healing that make it easier to cope with your ex moving on. But one thing you still have to watch out for is rumination. This is when your brain keeps going over the same negative thoughts again and again, usually things about the relationship that upset you, confuse you, or make you feel stuck. And if left unchecked, it can pull days, weeks, even months or years away from you, without you even fully realizing the extent of what's happening. So in the next episode, I'll share the strategies that have helped the people we work with stop ruminating about their narcissistic exes, so you can use them too. And I'll link to it here as soon as it's posted. Thank you for watching today's episode of the Unfilteredd Narcissistic Partners Podcast. If you found it helpful, please like and subscribe to the channel. My name is Juliana, your guide to overcoming the effects of narcissistic abuse, and I can't wait to connect with you in a future episode.